Well, alright. Yes, sir, the Battlefront Beta was not so long ago. I mean, I'm making this video probably a few days after it. I don't know when I'll upload it, but we just had the beta for Battlefront, and it was fantastic, in my opinion. And I just wanted to give my thoughts on the beta and what I think about it, and what I experienced, what I saw, and probably do like some sort of impressions review video like I usually do, talking about the good stuff and the bad stuff and everything in between, so that you guys can get an understanding for what the game is like and what it's going to be like pretty much when it gets launched. Obviously there were a lot of bugs and glitches and things like that, but it's a beta, so that's to be expected, that's okay. But just for the overall feel, if you haven't played it, then you kind of missed out, because it was, like I said, free. It's a free beta, anyone can get into it, and the game itself was amazing, and it was a really good breath of fresh air, especially considering that all the other FPS games out there are kind of pretty shitty at the moment. So yeah, it was very nicely timed. But anyways, let's get right into it with the good stuff as usual. The game looks fantastic. Oh my word, I mean, this is truly the next gen game that consoles have been waiting for, the current generation of consoles. This is probably going to make the most out of all the technology. Obviously PC users like me, it's not an issue because we've always had good graphics. Graphics aren't everything, I know. I'm not one of those people who think, oh, graphics is like the most important thing in the world. No, it's not, but it is somewhat important. Obviously you don't want to sit there and play an 8-bit game that got released in 2015 for Star Wars when it's like an FPS game. It just wouldn't work. So you need to have decent graphics, but in this case the graphics were just incredible. I mean, the scenery and settings as well, that's something that I might say. The maps, the scenery, the foreground and the background was just fantastic. I personally love snow maps, and the fact that it was a snow map was great. You know, the Battle of Hoth and whatnot. And the one thing that really caught my attention that I really enjoyed, and I really thought it was magnificent, and especially because it's such good attention to detail, was if you looked off into the distance, you could see the war continue. You can see other people fighting, you know, you can see the A-wings and the X-wings and the AT-ATs and AT-STs and, you know, like lasers and blasters and things like that going off in the distance. Obviously it's got nothing to do with the battle that's going on in front of you, but it's just a good thing to look at off in the distance, because it gives you that true realistic kind of war atmosphere. Because in conflict, it's not just 20 people v 20 people or 10 v 10, it's countries versus countries or empires versus empires, and in this case obviously they really nailed that feeling, that mood and that theme. So I think that it was fantastic, and like I said, the game looks great. It's one of the best looking games I've played in a long time. Next we have the animations. Now the animations I thought were, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, it was really good. I mean, when you got your lightsaber out, when you're playing as a hero, when you're throwing grenades and throwing imploders and all those gadgets and whatnot, and kind of setting things up and reloading weapons or getting the perfect time to cooldown and whatnot, all of those things was just absolutely fantastic. Especially people with the booster packs flying all over the place, you can see the character models actually do those things, not only for yourself but for other people around you. So I think the animations were pretty good. There was a few glitches with the heroes when they clashed, when they started using power moves and powerful attacks. There was a bit of a glitch in terms of the animations for them, but for the most part, like I said, it was really good. Something that I need to add on to that, which is quite similar, is the animations, or rather the ragdolls of the characters themselves. So not just when they're actually doing something, but when they get hit, you can see, like, if they get hit in the leg, then their leg flinches. If they get hit in the shoulder, then their shoulder goes back a little bit. If they get shot in the head, then their head flinches. And obviously in the game, for the character, it might not make a huge effect or have a huge impact, but when you are the one shooting and you can see that's how the character model reacts, it's fantastic. It's just absolutely amazing, especially if you get the kill. The kind of weapon that you use, you know, the caliber, if it's a large, you know, mounted weapon or a handheld weapon, or if it's a grenade and this and that, you can see the ragdoll effects of the character models, and they fall down and they get hit in a very realistic way. It's not one of those kind of gimmicky things where you're firing a laser or a blaster and it doesn't feel plasticky or tinny. It feels like you genuinely just blasted someone away with a blaster rifle or, you know, laser rifle, and you can see that the impact is strong, and that's something that a lot of the games miss. However, I feel like they've kind of nailed it perfectly in Battlefront, so I'm really happy about that. Next is the time to kill. Now, a lot of the games have issues as to getting the perfect timing. So some games like Call of Duty Ghosts, it took very little amount to kill someone. You literally kill them instantly. You can sneeze on someone and they would die right then and there. With other games it might take longer, so getting the balance right was very difficult for FPS games in general. However, for Battlefront, I think that they've pretty much perfected it. It might take just a tad bit too long sometimes, but obviously it depends on the kind of weapon that you're using, what kind of damage it does, and where you hit the enemy as well, because if you hit him in the head, obviously it's going to do more damage than if you hit him in the leg. But for the most part, I think the time to kill and time it takes to get a kill using the weapons that you have at your disposal is pretty much spot on. like I said, even though there are moments where people can just bunny hop like a traditional Battlefield sense, they can just bunny hop and jump around and escape your bullets, or in this case blasters and lasers and whatnot, but it wasn't as common as it is in Battlefield. And obviously a lot of people are saying Battlefront and Battlefield are similar because it's made by DICE and EA and whatnot. There are similarities here and there, but for the most part I will say 90% of it is different. It's completely new, completely different, and it feels that way as well. So the time to kill is definitely part of it. In Battlefield it feels like sometimes you're firing plastic. With Battlefront, however, it felt like you genuinely just blasted the shit out of someone, and you can see the impact like I said earlier, and it does do some decent damage. So I think the time to kill is pretty much spot on. The next point is a combination of a few things. Now personally I like to examine and look at the little things in the game, because it's the little things that matter. It's the small things, the small attention to detail aspects of the games that make me really go, oh wow, that was amazing. For example, in the game The Division, where your character goes up to a car, you can push a door with one of his hands, and when you shoot something, they say the wing mirror flies off, and it's those little things that matter. So in terms of Battlefront, things like that existed. I'm sure a lot of people missed it because they might not be paying attention, or they might be in the haze of battle and chaos around them, so they were tunnel vision. But there are many things that I think they did perfectly. For example, the crosshairs. Now the traditional crosshairs are 4 lines in the middle of your screen, right? One at the top, one at the bottom, one on the left and one on the right. But because Battlefront is obviously Star Wars and it's futuristic and blasters and lasers and whatnot, all they did was take away one crosshair and move them around to make it a kind of upside down triangle effect, that kind of look. And just that little thing alone makes it so much better. Like the HUD is improved drastically because of that, just because of those 3 little lines in the middle of your screen for the crosshairs. Just because they moved them around and eliminated one of the lines, it genuinely gave you that futuristic feeling. And it's such a small aspect of the game that people often overlook it, like I said. However, it has such a huge impact for people who appreciate it like me. Things like that were just amazing. And the thing about that is it also depends on the weapon. If you're using kind of like a mounted weapon, you get like a more of a circular kind of shape with like loads of lines around it. And if you're using obviously a handheld blaster or laser rifle, then the crosshair is different, but it changes from like the ATSTs to the ATs, and you know the A-wings and X-wings, and you know it depends on the weapon that you're using. So it changes from weapon to weapon. It's not kind of this generic one type of crosshair, which also shows that they put in a lot of time and effort into it, because they had to create a pretty much different crosshair for each weapon, and that takes time and it takes a lot of creativity as well. So it's something that I really appreciate. Other things like the booster packs, and I'll get to the cards in a second, but the booster pack is just amazing. I mean, it can get you into a fight and out of a sticky situation very quickly, and if you use it the right way at the right time, it's very powerful, and it does give you a huge tactical advantage, especially if you get up on vantage points and you rain down hell onto your enemies. It can really be used effectively. But as for the cards that you can choose on the bottom, the fact that they can recharge and refill is a really cool feature. I mean, personally, I think that some of those weapons, such as the sniper rifle, it recharges way too quickly, so I think that instead of it being 7 seconds or something like that, it should be like 12-15 seconds, because it's a very powerful thing. It's a one-shot kill to the head, so I think that certain things like that need to recharge slower and regenerate slower. But the fact that they've got 3 cards that you can choose and you can use them over time as they recharge and refill is a cool aspect, because it means that it eliminates those support classes, so you don't have to wait for someone to drop you an ammo crate or whatnot, and you can just get back into the fight at your own will, at your own time, at your own leisure. So I think that it kind of gives people more of a freedom to run around instead of sitting there and waiting. Another thing that I really loved about this game that's kind of, again, could be overlooked by most people is the bullet impact and the bullet damage, especially if you're firing your blasters at snow and at rocks like those on the mountain, on the cliffside. First of all, it looks amazing when you fire the laser. You can actually see it go into the air and kind of fly off, like kind of like a tracer, round from a traditional firearm. You can see the laser hit, and the snow just kind of pops up from the ground, and it leaves an impact, like an imprint. And also when you're running around in the snow, you leave footprints as well, which again is a hugely cool element that people would just not look at and probably just ignore, but for me it's fantastic. But like I said, when you fire your weapons at rocks and boulders and things like that, you can break them apart and you can chip little parts off it, and it ignites this kind of spark for a second, kind of like when you hit 2 pieces of flint together to create fire. It's kind of like that sort of look, and it's just really cool. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just so cool. And finally, about those kind of little things is the explosions. Oh my goodness, the explosions are one of the most powerful things I've seen in any FPS game ever. I mean, for example, in the games of Far Cry, the fire element is very realistic. It's one of those features that sets that franchise and that series apart from all its competitors and all the other FPS games out there. And with Battlefront, I feel like it has that same element, but it's not for fire, it's for explosions. The explosions are just fantastic. It really feels powerful and grounded and realistic, and especially the ion grenades and the imploders and whatnot. they create this kind of atmosphere around where they've blown up, and they send debris everywhere, and it's just so strong looking and so just cool. And I mean, it's amazing. I haven't seen explosion like that in a video game in a very, very long time. And again, like I said, these are just minor points that people will probably overlook or probably don't even care about, but for me, when you actually take the time to admire and appreciate what they've done, it's amazing. It just adds to the overall quality of the game. Anyways, the next thing that I want to talk about is those cards, those certain abilities that you get in game that I mentioned earlier. Now, the great thing about this is that anyone can run any setup of any kind. You can do any sort of combination of things, any weapon, any abilities, and cards or perks, as you want to call them, and you can just run around and do anything you want, and you are not tied down to a class like a traditional class system that you had in Battlefield and other games. You can just literally choose whatever you want, and that's really cool because it helps you experiment with different types of setups, different loadouts, and you can be effective in different areas in different ways depending on where you are on the battlefield and depending on what kind of situation you're in. And not only that, but you can also go into the main menu and you can customize it while you're in game, so you can change it. You're not tied down to one class or character that's predetermined, and even if you do choose your own setup, you're not tied down to that setup for the rest of the game. Next is battle pickups. Now, battle pickups are still in the game. I forget what they're called. I think they are just called pickups, I'm not sure, but it's those little circle things that you see in the game, and you can pick them up depending on which side you're on, whether you're on the rebel side or on the empire side. You can pick those things up off the ground and they give you certain abilities. Some of them are limited in time, so you have to use them quickly. For example, aircraft, or if you've got a hero pickup, or if you're gonna get into like an AT-AT or an AT-ST, you have like 10 seconds or 12 seconds to actually use it, otherwise it goes away. But other things like smart rockets and imploders and those mines and whatnot, they will always be in your back pocket. They will always be there, like orbital strikes and stuff, so you can just pick it up and use it whenever you need to or whenever you want to. And I think that they create a great dynamic because, again, in Battlefield you've always had pickups, especially in hardline and whatnot, and you can run around, pick stuff off the ground and use it to your advantage. Now, that can change the tide of battle, especially if you use the hero pickup, and that's the point I want to touch on next. The hero pickup is one of the coolest and craziest things I've seen. Yes, it can be used to change the tide of battle, but the heroes, whether it be Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker, they are not invincible, okay? They do take damage. Yes, it might take a lot of damage to take one down, but if you concentrate fire with 4 or 5 guys and maybe even an AT-ST or an AT-AT or maybe an aircraft like an A-Wing or an X-Wing of sorts, you can bring that respective hero down very, very quickly, especially if you combine it with explosions, because the heroes can deflect lasers and blasters and whatnot. If you shoot them with a weapon like a handheld weapon or a mounted weapon, they can deflect the lasers. However, with an explosion, they can't do anything. So if you combine all of those things together, you can really take down a hero very, very quickly. So I don't think that they are OP as such. They're not very, very powerful that they ruin the game, but they definitely add a great dynamic with the rest of the pickups as well. And like I said, it's just a great aspect to a game, and I'm so glad that they did it. And the final point that I want to make in terms of the positives is the air combat. Now, when you're in an A-Wing or an X-Wing or whatever, and you're getting into dogfights, basically, it is the most thrilling thing you have ever seen. Now, the bad aspect about that is the controls are terrible. The controls for the A-Wings and the X-Wings are the worst thing I have ever experienced in terms of flying aircraft. Now, in Battlefield, the jets and the helicopters and whatnot are not perfected. They don't really feel that great. However, you can control them. At least you have control. However, in Battlefront, it's the other way around. The controls are terrible, but the actual element of aircraft and dogfighting in the air, that is actually really, really cool. The way they've done it is so that you can aim at a certain place and you can hold the right mouse button, obviously on the PC, and you can lock onto your enemy and you can fire like that, or you can just move your crosshair above them or like in front of them depending on which direction they're going, and you can fire to try and hit them manually, with your own kind of aim. You also have certain maneuvers and abilities such as going really fast or putting up your shields to be invincible for a few seconds. Depending on which aircraft you're in, they have certain abilities as well. And like the cards and the abilities in the game for the troops, they also recharge when you're in an aircraft. And the main element for that is, like I said, it's just so cool. I mean, if you can imagine being in the air and being chased by 1 or 2 guys and you're flying fast and low to the ground, and there's like AT-STs and AT-ATs around you, and there's like the ground troops fighting each other and explosions going off, and you're flying in the middle of all of that and over it, and it's just amazing. It's like the coolest thing. The summary that I can give for this game, if I could summarize it, it would be that it's like a movie. The game is literally like a movie. It's basically, they've watched the Star Wars movies and they try to be as authentic as possible. They try to make it as realistic and as grounded as possible, and I think that they've nailed it. And overall, it is just magnificent. But yeah, that's pretty much my summary of the game for all the positive aspects. I will do a separate commentary where I talk about the negative aspects of the game, because there is a few, and I want to concentrate on those alone and kind of go into detail about it and kind of explain myself and what I think and why. But anyways, that's pretty much it for the review of Battlefront the beta in terms of the good things. If you enjoyed the video, leave some sort of rating and let me know what you thought about the game. Did you play the beta? Are you going to get the game? What did you think about it? And what did you think about this review? And stay tuned for the second part of this where I'll be talking about the negative things, which should be uploaded within the next day or two. But anyways, like I said, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.